Hey, everybody. Welcome to the In the Money Players podcast for March 18th, 2022. Going to take a look at some racing on Saturday from a couple of different spots that you've grown a little familiar with following along on our airwaves. We're going to touch on some stakes races with Matt Bernier. We're then going to have Jessica Paquette here for her seemingly now regular weekly appearance to cover the Sam Houston Race Park Pick 6 for Saturday night. We're also going to have Howard Kravets fresh in off his second place finish in the Ultimate Betting Challenge a couple of weeks ago to cover the Golden Hour Pick 4. It is going to be an action-packed hour or so, and we are going to get right into it now with our man, Matt Bernier, who is here to cover a smattering of stakes races from a couple of different spots in the country. Matt, how you doing?
Doing well, Nick. Looking forward to talking about these four races. We had a little bit of success last weekend. Hopefully we can do a little bit better here this weekend.
Yeah, definitely something to build on. Fun little run through the Tampa card. And I will admit that when I watched the Challenger, which is a race that we went over, I cursed because I needed Cody's wish. I thought I really needed Cody's wish, and I forgot that I did play one pick 4 ticket where I used Scalding, who ended up winning, who I think we mentioned very briefly in passing on Friday. And then, of course, from there, the sequence went almost exactly as I planned it, which happens very rarely, including the Tampa Derby with the big long shot Grantham running second. So it was a good day of racing at the Oldsmar Oval, and glad to have taken a look at it with you. Let's take a look at the 4 stakes we're going to talk about today. The first of them is the Silks Run at Gulfstream. We're going to touch on the Hutchison as well, which is the 11th at Gulfstream. The Silks Run is the 10th, and I wanted us to talk about this race mainly because as I looked at it, I realized it's a super competitive turf sprint with a number of horses from seemingly all walks of life, if you will, coming into this, and they're sort of converging where I really don't think there's a standout, and I wonder if favoritism could really be split amongst a couple of horses. What were your thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, the fact that Arrest Me Red almost by default feels like has to be the favorite simply because of the Ward and a Rad combination. But I don't know about you. I don't know that Arrest Me Red's a superstar. I think he's a very nice horse and fits in a race like this. But, Gulfstream for the first time, Gulfstream's turf can obviously be a little bit quirky for some horses. He's done really well in New York. I don't know if that necessarily translates down to South Florida. And at a short price, maybe you want to try to go against him. But if it's not him, then who? You can go through and take a look. Chessmaster was brilliant in that win at Tampa most recently. The problem is the pace was just glacial that day at Tampa Bay. And you have to assume that they're going to go much quicker here. Is that going to sap up some of that late kick that we saw from this horse winning that turf dash, winning that big with that big gaudy buyer speed figure? And then you look at a horse like Yes, I Am Free, who comes out of the Gulfstream Park turf sprint, where you saw this horse, you saw Belgrano, you also saw the pace setter who's coming off of a lengthy layoff, Warrior's Pride in there. They're all fine horses, but it was far and away the fastest Yes, I Am Free has ever run in his entire life. And he's run 20 times so far. So there are a number of questions, I think more questions than answers in this race. I think the most likely winner is probably Arrest Me Red. I wouldn't bet him at a short number. I'm curious your thoughts on the 2, Cool Quest. Cool Quest is not a brilliant racehorse, I don't think anyway. I think he's got some ability, but they're clearly searching around for what he actually wants to do. They ran him in that Florida bred stake last time out. No match for Gatsby. The third place finisher Pudding came back and earned an 88 in the next start. But for all intents and purposes, Pudding is more or less a 20 to 25 claimer. We're not talking about superstars in that race. I find it interesting that they come back to the turf here. There is a little bit of turf pedigree, especially on the dam side. This one's a half to Grand Adventure, who was a multiple graded stakes winner up at Woodbine on the grass. Frosted, I don't immediately think of grass, but 11% with the turf sprinters. I guess I wanted kind of a fresh face, and Cool Quest was that. I don't know if he's good enough. I don't know if he likes the turf, but he's kind of where I landed in here. What were your thoughts on him?
It's funny for my picks for Twin Spires. I actually picked Cool Quest. So, and I think I used a lot of the same reasoning you did, which is that I really couldn't embrace any of the other horses, the more established turf sprinters. I generally scoff at horses like Cool Quest and say, well, why is a horse that, can get 100+ buyer speed figure on the dirt running on the turf when his lone turf race was sort of ho hum? But, I kind of wondered if maybe he's just a better horse right now than he was when he ran in that turf sprint. And I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, he immediately came out of it and started putting together one good race after another, and with that 5-race stretch or so, culminating with a recent second place finish against Stakes Company. And granted, as you said, it was Florida bred Stakes Company, so it wasn't by any means anything particularly robust. But I'm really interested to see the workout report because I watched the workout on ExpressBet TV from 3 back. Brian Lynch worked this horse with Classic Causeway, so he at least believes that there's some talent there. I didn't have any video of the most recent turf work. So when the DRF workout report comes out, I'm going to take a look and see. I have a feeling that was a fast work. And I mean, we know it's fast based on the 47-1. I'm going to take a look at that. You know, I felt similarly to you on a lot of the same of the other horses. Arrest Me Red has just, I mean, he's just pissed along on the lead in his last two starts, right? I mean, his paces have been incredibly slow. It was sort of amazing that he was able to get away with it the second time. There was a gate scratch before the Aqueduct Turf Sprint Championship, one of the most tortured names in the history of racing. But and so that really put the ball in his court, and he took advantage of it. You know, Paco's the kind of guy that's not going to miss that opportunity. Now, do I fear that if this horse has to sit a little bit off the pace, that's going to be a problem? Not really. I mean, that's Irad's game anyway. But I don't want to take 2-1 or 5-2 on him, as you said. I think Yes I Am Free's last race would probably win this very easily. But how can you trust that? And you know, wasn't he a last time was the time horse? So I had the same reservations, and I picked the race 2-9-3. I think Yes I Am Free and Arrest Me Red are the two best turf horses in the race. I tried to make Belgrano. He was brutal last time. He had a great trip, came right up the rail, just had nothing to offer. And I feel like there's a world in which Cool Quest might actually outfoot all of these horses from the start. And, you know, never a bad thing to take the speed of the speed in a turf sprint.
Especially down at Gulfstream. I feel like that's the trip that more often than not works. If you're not outright on the lead, you need to be pressing it all throughout and be the one to get the jump on any of the deep closers. So I'm with you there. The only other horse I'd throw out there, and I'm curious your opinion, Warrior's Pride. We have nothing published since that most recent run, but that was the first start since August of last year. This is a confirmed speed type. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of felt like he ran like a short horse where he went out there, he set the fractions, and he just stopped. Maybe that's being kind, but he is at least one who could be a bit of a fly in the ointment. Even if you don't think he can win, you know he's going to figure prominently from the minute the gates break.
Yeah, he's gonna give account of himself right from the start, and he would certainly make the job tougher for Cool Quest theoretically, unless Julian tries to rate Cool Quest a little bit off the pace. I don't know if that's really much of a possibility, but Warrior's Pride is very fast, and so yeah, he'll have an impact on this race regardless of whether he's around at the finish. I think he'll put a hurting on whoever wants to battle with him early. That much we know. It's a pretty fun race, the Silks Run, which goes as a race number 10 on this 12 race card. Let's take a look. We're going to take a brief look at the 11th. And I kind of wanted to talk specifically with Matt about Nitrous Channel, who is going to be a prohibitive favorite in the Hutchison. You know, I shook my head a little when I saw the Hutchison, and I thought back to the days when the Hutchison was used as a jumping off point for 3-year-olds in January. I thought of More Than Ready, who won the Hutchison en route to the beginning of his 3-year-old campaign that didn't really involve anything that rivaled what he did as a 2-year-old. But the Hutchison is now a mid-March 6-furlong stake race with no grade, And so we have a horse like Nitrous Channel, who was an incredibly impressive debut winner going back to early February. Obviously, George Weaver had a few different options with him, which included, I'm sure, stretching him out. I think it looks as if they're being realistic in terms of keeping him at a shorter trip. And he lands here in a race where I certainly felt like he was a very, very likely winner.
Yeah, I mean, I know how difficult it is to make a morning line. I'd be stunned if you got 7-5 on him. I think he's probably closer to 2-5 or 3-5, just purely based on speed figures. I mean, yeah, he earned a 94 that day on the Beyer scale compared to the rest of the field. The next highest fig in the last race is a 77. I mean, he towers over this field purely on numbers. Visually, I thought all things considered, he was pretty professional for a first-time starter. Had to be pushed on a little bit down the backside, but he responded and took over pretty readily and drew off. I thought he was very logical in here. I mean, there's really no other way for me to put it. The third place finisher came back, broke the maiden next out with a 90 Beyer. So the form seems to be stacking up. I will be a little bit curious. Timeform US has him very clearly on the lead by himself. I wonder if Golden Wand to the inside is a horse that can be just a little bit more aggressive out of the gate. This one set fast fractions at that 7/8 race back in September last year as a 2-year-old. Granted, he packed it in after that, but I'll be very curious to see if there's another horse that does at least make Nitrous Channel earn it early on, because if they just gift wrap it to him, then sure, he could win by 10 and he'll be the bee's knees. He'll earn some big fig and we'll all be, anxiously awaiting his stretch out in distance. But I wonder if Golden Wand or someone like that is going to be a little aggressive out of there and just say, look, we know you're the horse to beat, but you got to earn it here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there could be a world in which Golden Wand going may actually be a good thing for him to just sort of latch onto his flank and go on with it from there. I am a believer that speed horses are generally at their best when they're on the lead. Nitrous Channel, I'm guessing, maybe not the prettiest mover in the morning, because the workout reports prior to his debut were not really very positive. And then this horse took money the entire time in the face of 2 Todd Pletcher trainees. So word was out. George Weaver, known as a guy who's willing to share his opinion on his horses pretty readily at the clocker stand and beyond. And I think that was kind of the case with Nitrous Channel, a horse who it's fun to see. I mean, maybe we could see him down the line in races like the Woody Stevens and the I'm putting the cart before the horse, saying the Alan Jerkins, but those are the grade 1 races, of course, in this division that he would seemingly be destined for based on his very promising debut. Interested to see how that Hutchison plays out. Let's take a look at the other 2 stakes. We were going to try a couple of graded events at Oaklawn. One of them is a newly graded event. And one of them is a newly named event. The 7th is the Whitmore, which is named for the venerable gelding, who of course won the Breeders' Cup Sprint in 2020. The Whitmore is at 6 furlongs. It is a race that was formerly known as the Hot Springs, which I think Whitmore won something like 27 or 28 times. It seems like he won it every year from 2017 to 2021, including, except last year he actually lost to CZ Rocket. You know, this is a fun group, Matt, and we see kind of a changing of the guard in the Midwest Sprint division, and the Whitmores of the world have given way to horses like Hollis and Greeley and Ben, both of whom seem to know how to get to the winner's circle, and Bob's Edge, who we really have to figure out whether it's a good time to take Bob's Edge, who was 7-1 last time. He's going to be about a third of that this time.
Yeah, that's the tough call. If you do like Bob's Edge, and to be honest, I think he's arguably the most likely winner in the race, just based on that King Cotton. I thought he was spectacular. Giant move on the far turn. Typically, I like to look for those sort of turn moves where some horses can get around there and some horses can't. And typically, if you can run the turns, you're at a major advantage compared to the horses that do their best just strictly on the straightaway. I thought he looked really good. Home Base came back and won next out with the 93. Buyer flattered that form. You brought up Hollis. He finished 5th. He won next out with the 97. So I do think in many ways Bob's Edge is the horse to beat. But to your point, from a gambling standpoint, it very much felt like last time was the time. Same as Yes, I Am Free. We talked about in that race at Gulfstream, where you had a giant price last time. You're going to get a fraction of it this time around. I'm very curious your thoughts. Greeley and Ben, I don't have any real knocks other than I think Broberg has done a really good job of placing this horse in spots where he fits. This is, to me, even though this may not be the saltiest group, I think this might be a little bit tough for him. But then again, if you're looking at 9-2 or 5-1, I'm not going to argue with a horse that likes to win races. He's 19 for 30 overall. The big horse that I'm going to fade in here, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, is Hollis. To me, when Hollis has been tested, he just hasn't passed it. He really seems to thrive against inferior company. That's just my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but I feel like we've seen on a number of occasions that really when the rubber meets the road, he just doesn't really have it compared to some of the others. This is a horse that isn't necessarily fast enough right now where I'm going to go. I like Tulane Trist. I think Tulane Trist is a talented racehorse, needs to prove it from a speed figure standpoint, is certainly not as fast as some of the other ones that we've already talked about, but visually, I've liked everything this horse has done. I know everything's set up beautifully for him at the Fairgrounds in that most recent start. There was a 3-way duel on the front. He just settled to the back beneath Brian Hernandez, and they took over and won for fun. I think it was just a means to an end, a starting off point. Yes, he needs to prove he can handle the height and class, but I'm of the opinion that there still may be a forward move here compared to some of these older established veterans. And I think I'm going to get a decent price on him. He's 9-2. I think he probably goes off somewhere around there, given that you've got Bob's Edge in here, given that you've got Hollis and a couple of the other ones we've already talked about.
Yeah, I have no argument with him. I think he's interesting, and I have a lot of respect for the job that Cherie DeVoe does. Look, she was willing to run this horse in the Woody Stevens last year. I'm sure the racing office let her know ahead of time it was coming up a little light numbers-wise. Of course, it did feature Jackie's Warrior, but it was a race where he went off 8-1. So, I mean, He was by no means an outsider, and he really hasn't done anything other than a poor race at Keeneland since then to sort of lead you to believe that he's undeserving of a try against better horses. You know, the feeling I have about this race is that there are basically 4 horses in here that all have good tactical speed. They're all horses that are capable of getting the lead. They're capable of sitting a little bit off of it. They might ultimately want to be the types that stalk. One of them is going to go. And I have a feeling that whoever it is going to stay. And especially if they end up somewhat isolated on the front end. I'm speaking basically of Heart Rhythm, a Royal Daher, Greeley and Ben, and Hollis. And Hollis was given a bit of a passive ride 2 back in the race with Bob's Edge and the King Cotton. And he came apart late. And then he's been much more engaged in his 2 allowance wins. And so I wonder if maybe having the outside, he's sort of in the driver's seat. But I agree with you generally that, I mean, my sentiment is that taking this horse at 5-2 or so just seems like a really bad idea. And maybe I'm being a little bit of a Sam Houston homer, but I'm going to pick Greeley and Ben. You know, I think he's a consistent horse. He's obviously very classy. His last race was not nearly good enough to make him competitive in here. I would probably up the Stoner Side Sprint Fig a couple of points. Everybody did kind of come back and sort of validate it at that number. Mr. Moneybags ran about the same race when he beat Texas Breds in his next start, but that was a fast pace, and he stayed on well towards the end. It comes up very competitive numbers-wise with Timeform US. And I wondered if maybe David Cabrera is going to be the one that's going to take advantage, being that there's really no speed to his inside at all. Why mess up that inside position and potentially being able to get the lead? Because I do think he's good enough to stay if he's able to get it. It's a fascinating race, though, and one I'm really interested in seeing, one deserving of the name of a hard-knocking old horse like Whitmore. Bob's Edge, a horse that really prior to his last start had opportunities in stakes company and really hadn't run at all. And again, I mean, I brought this up last week when we were talking about the stakes at the stake race at Oaklawn. You can use Lasix at Oaklawn. So you have some of these horses that have run poorly in stakes races elsewhere, and suddenly at Oaklawn they run better. It always kind of throws me for a loop. But anybody else you wanted to touch on in this field?
No, I mean, to your point, I personally, I would like to see Cabrera be aggressive on Greeley and Ben, because again, and maybe I'm being a little bit harsh as far as Hollis is concerned, but I just feel like if you really give him a stiff test, I just don't know that he really wants to fight on, frankly. That's just my opinion. Again, could be totally wrong. But bigger picture, from a gambling standpoint, Hollis at a short number I don't think is a great option in this spot. Greeley and Ben, though, I can't help but think he's going to be every bit of that 9-2 morning line, if not more than that, simply because people will look at it and say, look, he's been sort of, put in advantageous positions, and maybe he's not quite that good. But again, there's something to be said about a horse that wins 2/3 of his races in his career. He likes to go out there. He can both win on and off the lead. But given the fact that it doesn't seem like there is a genuine speed burner in here, why not take your chances there? Go out to the front, say, come and catch me. If you think Hollis could blink, if you think Bob's Edge, maybe that last time out was the time, and maybe he's not really quite that good. And if you think a horse like Tulane Tryst just frankly isn't good enough to step up and he's going to be at a tactical disadvantage, I can't argue at all with Greeley and Ben.
I think when you're dictating terms to everybody else, it helps without question. That is 100%. The Whitmore race number 7 on Saturday afternoon at Oaklawn. Let's move to race number 9, the Essex Handicap, which is it's actually running as a grade 3 for the first time. It's a race that has featured a number of good, I would say lower level handicap horses for a number of years, but this edition came up solid enough. The 1, 2, 3 finishers of the Razorback are back, and the Plainsman undoubtedly looks like a very heavy favorite here, coming in off the win in the Razorback. It was kind of a fun showdown between he and Thomas Shelby, where they slugged it out the entire way. I actually thought for a second in mid-stretch the Popular Kid might cut them both down at a huge price. He ended up settling for third. Rated R Superstar probably made the only real off-the-pace move in there in what was otherwise a merry-go-round race. You also have Hanale's Houdini, who was claimed from 10 Strike Racing back in October, and you have 10 Strike Racing represented with Warriors Charge, the winner of the Razorback all the way back in 2020. Fun group.
I'm going to need your help here, because I chatted with Howard Kravets last night on his podcast about this race. And unfortunately, I kept coming back to 2 horses that, if I'm being honest, they're both hangers. I didn't really want the horses coming out of the local races at Oaklawn, just simply because I felt like you could poke holes in them. And I mean, to be honest, I think Plainsman is the horse to beat in here. I think he's a good horse. I just don't know that I need him at 8-5 or 2-1. He can win, but I've seen him lose in the past. Warriors Charge, I think personally at this level, I think he is a need the lead type. And I know some folks may look at that last running line and say, well, he came from 5 off of it. There was a runoff pace setter that stopped basically at the quarter pole, and somebody had to inherit it, and it happened to be this horse. I think he's at his absolute best when he's controlling things. Maybe he will do that here in this spot, and if he does, he's very, very dangerous. But another one at a short price, I don't know that I need to find out in here. Again, my horses are probably better used underneath. The 7, Beau Luminary, and the 8, Hanale's Houdini. Let's start with Hanale's Houdini, who you already mentioned. Maker took this horse 4 starts back, The most recent run in the Jennings at Laurel. The form of it is holding up quite well. Cordmaker came back and won the General George with a 98 buyer. The third place finisher came back and earned a 102 in the next start in a victory. Hanale's Houdini, I thought, had no business not going by Cordmaker. in the Jennings, but maybe that's not giving Cordmaker enough credit for being the hardy old veteran that he is. But it's not as though that's the first time Hanalei Houdini has kind of got close and doesn't really want to totally finish the job. And I can say the exact same thing about Bo Luminari, who, granted, if you're a Timeform US user, you've seen that this is a horse who has been up against it from a pace standpoint a number of times where there haven't been great paces to run at, and yet this one still delivers a pretty solid run. The problem is throughout the entire career, even in the victories, we're looking at 3/4 of a length, a half length ahead. You do have that 7-length victory, but that was way back at the very beginning when he broke his maiden. I think he's a good horse. I'm a little bit skeptical about how good he actually is and if he can win a race like this, but I'm someone who, probably to a fault, if I don't love a number of horses coming out of a common race, I'm just going to default to the others, the new faces. To me, that's the outside too, but I have to acknowledge that they feel a little bit hangy to me. What's your thought?
Yeah, I thought Bo Luminari was very interesting. He's the kind of horse that I generally look to bet with the Timeform US PPs that you alluded to, given that he's had to rally into slow paces pretty consistently. And you hope that the antidote to that would be Ricardo Santana, who was on board last time and did let him kind of sit back. It was also a wet track. He's not run poorly at all on wet tracks. He's actually earned his best Beyer speed figure on a wet track last time out, and he nearly won the Ben Ally on a super sloppy track back in April of 21 at Keeneland. So he does feel like a horse that's going the right direction. What I didn't love was that he's gotten a little bit of time off, and Rudolph Brissett has great numbers in seemingly every category. He's kind of bad when he leaves horses off 60 to 120 days. And so I wondered if maybe this was a setup for a race at Keeneland. I know that you generally don't use, with a horse like this, you generally don't use grade 3 stakes as preps, but maybe it is, maybe the eye is on the Ben Ally or something like that in a month and bringing him back there. But I agree. I think his ceiling might be second or third, but he's interesting to try and get into one of those slots. I think Warrior's Charge is very clearly a need to lead type. There were basically, as you mentioned, there were 2 races going on last time. There was the one that the leader was in, and there was the one that everybody else was in. And he led the pack in the one that everybody else was in. And when the leader stopped, he inherited the lead and he just went on with it. He's obviously a talented horse that just has had a really hard time putting everything together. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that circumstances had to go so well for him in order for him to put forth his best. And maybe, fingers crossed, because we're always going to root for our friends at 10 Strike, maybe they found a way to beat that. It was a surprisingly strong effort for a horse that had run poorly in his most recent start. From there, I do think you can attribute that to the wet track. He has not been a big fan of wet tracks. He might be the only Munnings that doesn't like a wet track. If I was going to make a selection, it would be one of the 2 outside horses probably as well, because I just don't trust any of these horses that are going to get bet. I don't trust Plainsman. I liked Plainsman in the Cigar Mile. I thought for a second in mid-stretch that it was going to be a huge score, and he ran well, and he came back. He runs the same race every time. Right. And so if somebody jumps up and runs better, he's going to lose. There's no question about that. I thought Joel gave him a phenomenal ride last time out to put him close. And I wish there was maybe one more really strong speed type and I could be clever and pick Rated R Superstar, but he gives up so much ground early and there's just really not enough pace in here to give him a serious shot. Fun race to watch. I don't really know if I'm terribly excited about betting it, maybe other than to try and stuff Bo Luminari in there underneath the main players, basically the 2 Brad Cox horses.
Yeah, maybe in another lifetime I could have looked at Title Ready. I just don't know where the horse is from a form standpoint. He's been thrown into some very, very difficult positions, to say the least. But he is a horse that if you can forgive, I don't know, the better part of a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, he does have a few races that at least make him reasonably competitive in here, but he is another one that is more or less, I don't want to call him pace dependent, but he would really appreciate a barbecue up front. I don't know that they're going to go that fast early on, which could certainly hinder his chances, but more importantly, his form recently just leaves quite a bit to be desired.
Yeah, I guess I'm in agreement that the Pegasus was an interesting placement off his 6th place finish in the tinsel. Almost as good as the Dubai World Cup was off. Actually, he went into the Dubai World Cup, all things considered, in pretty good form. But yeah, he has been ambitiously spotted, and I do think he's in a far more realistic spot. Maybe one that's not quite realistic enough, but they're trying. So they're getting there. Fun edition of the Essex. One I think that Matt and I can agree on. We're probably as interested in finding out who the winner is than betting on it, because it's going to be a hell of a lot harder to bet on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think the horses that you and I touched on, for being honest, they're probably better used underneath, but against a group like this, I mean, this is, to be fair to the connections, everybody involved, this is a great spot for those horses because it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
like you've got to deal with any kind of a horse that's just, head and shoulders above everyone else. If you're going to get the job done in a graded stake, it's probably going to be in one of these races.
Totally agree. That is the Essex Handicap, which goes as race 9 at Oaklawn Park. That wraps it up for Matt and I. Matt, thanks so much for joining me. Best of luck. I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Nick. Thanks.
Make plans to join us down in Houston, Texas for the NHC contest at Sam Houston Race Park. Our friends down in Space City have been a partner for the meet, and we've seen some great things happen, undoubtedly, and it all culminates with Texas Champions Day next Saturday night, March 26th, which includes the NHC qualifier. Top 2 spots receive berths to the National Horse Players Championship, $1,000 live bankroll entry fee. You keep what you have left after meeting the minimum wagering requirements. Make plans to join us down in H-Town. Big thanks to Matt Bernier. We are going to transition now into Sam Houston Race Park conversation for Saturday night. And to do so, we've brought back our dear friend, Jessica Paquette, who is one of the track handicappers at Sam Houston. She is here to cover this Saturday night Space City Pick 6. Jessica, how's it going?
Hey, Nick, it's great. How about you?
It's going very well. Happy birthday, of course, to What a Trippy, who is 18 today.
18, old enough to gamble. So, hey, there's that.
Old enough to gamble in some states, not one of which is Texas, where he would have to be 21. So he will have to hold on.
I
He's
did
21
not
in Texas. Yeah. So we're
if
we're
I had to guess that would not have been I would just have assumed it was much younger.
We're very puritanical here, so that's there's a lot of Bible Belt action.
Fascinating. The more you know.
Exactly. So we're going to cover the Space City Pick 6 for Saturday night at Sam Houston, which begins in race number 4. Locally, it is Wiener Dog night, so there will be a lot of excitement. I think after races 2 and 3, we're going to be doing all the Wiener Dog race. I'll tell you what, if half the crowd shows up that did last week for Camels and Ostriches, I will be very, very pleased, and I'll be even more pleased if that same number of people ever showed up to watch horse races.
That would be nice. You try to drag them in with something, and then they discover that horse racing is fun too.
Exactly. You got to get him there to help him figure it out. But I made probably an obnoxious number of comments last week on the mic about how many horse races were left and how much horsepower there was left throughout the evening and how much time it was to the next horse race. So probably I'm sure a lot of people said that really I wish he'd stop because we came here to watch a virtually 11-second camel race. I will admit,
terrified of ostriches, for the record, so I'm not that sad to have missed that ordeal.
I'll tell you my biggest takeaway, other than finding both of them to be somewhat maddening, was ostriches are a lot more docile than camels. Camels are very, very stubborn.
Ostriches are mean, though. Like when I was in school, when I was in college, there was an ostrich farm kind of near the university, and I went to see the ostriches one day. They're mean. I've never been happier to eat an animal, honestly, after that.
Yeah. A lot of pecking with that long neck, but
and I'm so short, so I think they have leverage over me.
Well, I think and of course nobody's tuned in to hear us talk about this, but we have to finish our thoughts. I think with the ostriches, they have a better system, so they sort of jam the ostriches into the gate from and bring them as close as possible. Then they let the jockeys get on, and then the net at the other end is used for them to basically be herded right into the van. Whereas the camels are so big, and to load them into the starting gate on Friday night, one of them just absolutely refused to go in the gate. And so the next night, the starter told everybody that he had schooled him that morning and that he was ready to go and he was off the starters list. Well, they figured out that if you load the camels basically 2, 1, and then 1 right behind it, they would let the first one walk through, slam the gate shut on the second one, and they'd be okay. So it worked out and he was able to start. And ironically, he ended up winning Saturday night. So
next year, you and me, camel race, right?
The poor camel that has to tote my my ass around, he will definitely be the biggest loser. That's for sure. Let's get into. But yes, if you're ready to ride a camel, I will strongly consider.
Sure, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's take a look at this Space City Pick 6 for Saturday night, which begins in race number 4. I have not watched your handicapping video yet for Saturday night, so I don't know who you like. I wanted to keep it suspenseful as much as I possibly could. The first leg is that maiden special weight race at a mile. We're going to be dealing with a relatively short-priced favorite here. I actually think in the form of Skywave, who is trained by Scott Young, who's having a terrific meet, but Steve Asmussen is represented as well, and his horse is, of course, always well-backed.
I think it really boils down to these two horses, right? Like Magazine Street has some class, some pedigree, Half to Finite, a graded stakes winner, as well as a stakes winner named Reride. This is that weird Steve Asmussen horse, though, that does not break well. I mean, one of the trademarks of the Asmussen barn is they come out of the gate pretty sharp typically, and this one just has not seemed to get with the program. It's had some time since that local debut in January. No questions of class. Big Scott Young fan. I'm going to give Magazine Street maybe the slight edge here.
You're going to go with Magazine Street even over Scott Young. Oh, man. All right.
I know, like, I'm keeping you on your toes.
I picked Scott. I know. No, I like Skywave. I think Skywave is an interesting stretch out. But again, I mean, I picked it 6-2, so I have nobody beyond those two, really. Magazine Street is showing up as a new gelding, and I think this is actually a new gelding.
The time off makes sense, right? Like, I know we've had many discussions about sometimes the geldings listed are not as recently gelded as they seem to be. But yeah, this one, maybe he did get a little brain surgery in the past 2 months.
The one that has consistently drawn my ire is run on one day, gelded the next day, show up in the races 10 days later. That's just not happening.
The 10 days, I can give it 10. It depends, right? Like you are supposed to move them kind of right away after you do it and get them moving, or they get really swollen and it gets very unpleasant. But I think that's when I was at Suffolk at a cheaper circuit, that was realistic. Like sometimes you'd see them back in 2 weeks. But in a lot of cases, this makes more sense.
Not a lot of time for convalescing when you're talking about horses that need to earn their keep.
That's it. We all have jobs to do.
Exactly right. And moving on to race 5, which will kick off the pick 5, rock bottom maiden claimers at 6.5 furlongs. And, we talk a lot in dealing with these kind of races about horses that are moved right to the bottom. And Brett Calhoun is wasting no time putting Mighty Happy in for 7,500 off of a couple of not particularly strong, but not overwhelmingly bad maiden special weight races. There were a lot of steps on the ladder. I could say that he skipped in putting Mighty Happy right in for 7,500.
Yeah, I feel like this filly's coming into the paddock with a big red flashing for sale sign on her for sure. And you give her the benefit of the doubt. That debut in her 2-year-old season, I don't really think of the Run Happies as being as precocious as maybe I originally thought they'd be. She makes a lot of sense getting better as a 3-year-old, and the more her 3-year-old season goes on. That effort last time was not good, but first start off of a layoff, I'll give her a pass. But I mean, what do you do with this horse? Do you just say class and single and move on?
Yeah, well, in large part because, I mean, the rest of the field is really
This is not a group of world beaters.
Yeah, it's about what you'd expect in a $7,500 maiden claimer, and I think Brett is just being realistic about what he has. Yeah. I mean, I tried to make some of the other ones pref right for
That's
Scott
the only
Young.
other way I could try to look, really.
Right, because at least this horse ran against decent horses in her debut. Anna Claus came back and finished a good second in an allowance race. And I don't think Promptly Done is a bad horse. And even Dial It In, who was third in there, they earn speed figures that would make them competitive, right? Sure. You're assuming that a high 20, low 30 type of buyer speed figure is probably going to put you in the ballpark in this race. And I think Mighty Happy will probably win, but yeah, she's awfully tough to embrace.
Yeah.
That takes care of race number 5. On to race 6, which is at 5 furlongs on the Connolly Turf Course. I can report that as of today, the weather has improved substantially from yesterday. It's about 75 degrees and the sun is out. And long range, we're expecting warm temperatures for your return to the great state of Texas next week.
I expect nothing less.
Exactly. The Mother Nature has been given her. She received the email that you need to get. You need warm temperatures. I'm
out of nice coats. I have nothing new as far as outerwear to wear. So we're just gonna the world needs to cooperate with me for this.
I think coats not going to be necessary next week. I would imagine, but I will admit in this 6th race, I am becoming. I probably am allowing my own picks to affect too much of what I did in here. But I picked Aragon last time. And I actually think Aragon ran a really good race when you look at the context of the entire race and you think about her cutting back. So I think her going to 5 furlongs actually makes her very interesting. This is a horse with a ton of turf pedigree on the dam side, and that was why I picked her. And I got kind of a sideways glance from Trey Styles, who didn't think she had any chance. And so actually there was a brief moment at the top of the stretch where it looked like she could win. Now she completely stopped after that. So I'm hoping that it was a distance-related question. But I will admit, Jessica, I didn't want to pick Princess Nene. And I love Austin Gustafson. I think he does a great job, and she could easily win. I just wanted to pick somebody who'd be a better price.
Yeah, I was trying to be a little bit clever here, and I went with the 10 Athenian Princess. I loved her going into that race last time out. She showed a little bit of speed. That was enough for me. She showed she got over the surface and has some upside here with the cutback and distance. She gets blinkers on. I think she'll be a little bit more and maybe even sharper out of the gate. Midnight Storm, I think he's going to turn out to be an okay turf sire. I don't think he's going to light the world on fire. Like, he certainly didn't get a lot of attention early on as a stallion. But out of a Holy Bull mare, the grass makes sense. Ronnie Cravens has been very sharp with these horses switching to the turf. So if he liked her effort last time out, good enough for me.
I will admit I was smarting yesterday as I looked at the tote board after Warriors Haven won at 21-1, first off the claim. And I mean, God bless Mary Saavedra, the prior trainer, owner, and breeder of Warriors Haven, but that was a pretty damn big claim. And I even made a note in my racing form after I made the morning line and while I was handicapping, and I put, why would Ronnie Cravens claim this horse? And then I was reminded on the gallop out, that this was a horse that he could really move forward. She ended up paying a really big price and was the key to a pick 5 that paid $1,700. Granted, the races were taken off the turf, but the next biggest priced winner was 5-2.
Yeah,
so
I've been really, the more I've, being able to come down to Sam Houston this season, I've gotten to talk to a lot of the horsemen and get to know them a little bit better than I did last year. And Ronnie's one I really enjoy speaking to. He's a really sharp horseman and he has a very good eye for these turf horses.
Yeah, and he's done an incredible job at this meet. He's done very well at the claim box. It's been a very good meet for Ronnie Cravens. Moving on to race number 7, 3 more to go on this Saturday night card. I thought this was a super fun race. I'm interested to hear what you had to say.
I'm going to call me crazy here. I'm taking a little bit of a swing with Beer Empress. Why not at a big price? I thought she looked like a really good thing in her maiden win. And her debut on paper, this is one of those, I know we've talked about that sometimes the chart doesn't give the entire story. It's helpful to go back and watch the races if you didn't see the race. She looked very, very, very green. And I like the way she showed some interest at the end. Looked like she had a little bit of a light bulb moment. It was way too late, but she kind of got it. And she put it all together last time out. Now she gets a class test. This is one I think Danny Pish has thought pretty highly of as well. So why not?
Yeah, I also get the feeling that when he entered her in here, he probably was waiting to see what was going to happen at the entry box. And then looking at the PPs, probably realized she actually fits really well.
Sure.
And she does. I mean, from a speed figure perspective, she fits on basically any measurable speed figure. And really on some of them, she's faster than some of these horses. I thought she was one of a number of contenders. I picked the 8Y Behave, who I thought, all things considered, had a pretty good trip last time out. She's now second off the layoff. This feels like a race where they're supposed to move. And if they do, I think you want horses like Beer Empress, like Why Behave. And you're supposed to be, even Roland Chrome, who I picked last time, who, probably at 8-1 last time, that was the day you wanted to bet her. She's going to be about a third of that this time around. And she's a horse who does need things to happen in front of her. Anna Claus, I felt similarly. She's probably got to run better than she has in her last 2 starts, but she did validate her maiden win last time out with a good effort at a mile and now shortens up in distance. Fun race top to bottom, and one where, the interesting thing is that there are 2 Asmussen trainees, both of whom I think you can bet against.
Yeah, I think they're a little vulnerable here for sure.
Yeah, I don't particularly like Lady Mila, and it seems like every time I say, wow, I would bet the other Steve, regardless of how the circumstances shake out, they never run well. So there's a reason why Stewart ends up on certain Steve horses, and this is the case here as well. On to race number 8. That's a 3-life allowance event at 1 mile and a 16. Speaking of Steve, he is very well represented here with Octagali.
I think he looks really obvious, right? But I am going to try to be a little bit clever. Nautical Moon, fresh and sense of win, a little bit of a class test, but let's talk about the Francisco Bravo barn. This is a barn that has just been quietly live. So this is a class test. They get Lane Luzzy aboard. And another Sam Houston horseman to talk about. I feel like Lane is riding entirely different than he did last year. He's a young kid, and I think he kind of got it all together. He's riding better. He's getting some better mounts too, but I think he really took that step forward.
Good pedigree too.
Yeah, the sport helps.
Yeah, it does. He's ridden extremely well. I totally agree. And look, I mean, there's something to be said for Santos Incorporated, right? There's a reason why Jose Santos represents as an agent 3 of the top.
He'll make you a star.
I think 3 of the top 6 riders. It's pretty gaudy. I joked with Austin Gustafson last week that or maybe it was with Raylo. I don't remember on the Who Are You episode. I said, if I follow Joe, so I don't need to watch replays because I get the stretch drive of all of the races with his riders. So yeah, I thought Octagali ran really well last time out, being second to Bandit Swanson. That was a race where the pace largely held together. I agree about Francisco Bravo. He's very quietly put together that 8 of 15 in the money record, which is strong. And from a limited sample, his horses seem to run very well. This is a race where I'm the slightest bit concerned that Philo Beto could get away from these horses. I thought he ran really well last time out, and I know that Gustafson has really high aspirations for Feel the Fear. I thought Feel the Fear was terrific, and he's one of the honor codes that you've referenced that Austin has been sprinting, but he wants to run in long.
They just keep sprinting and winning.
They do, right. Well, and I was also in the camp of people that felt like honor code was probably always going to be at his best at 7 and 8 furlongs, and just happened to run as well as he did in the Whitney and the Breeders' Cup Classic because he was really good. But Philo Beto's loose in here, and let me tell you something, as you and I probably can easily agree, Rye Eichelberry on the front end is that's a very dangerous spot for everybody else.
Yeah.
So interesting 8th race. We go on to the 9th, which is not as interesting, to be perfectly honest, but it is a Texas bred maiden special weight event with a decent sized field. Now, I am positive that you picked against Cause I'm Divine.
If I get beat by a 19 start maiden at a morning line price of 3 to 5, then so be it. But I am not. Nope, absolutely not.
I did get the morning line right here, right? I mean, I'm not betting her, but she is like 3 to 5.
No, I think you're right. But like maybe the 20th star is the charm, but it will not be on my dollar. Absolutely not. No,
I totally agree. And I even went back and watched the replay because I remembered her second place finish to Honor Given pretty well. And I mean, you want to talk about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. At the quarter point, she was 1 to 5, and then she wouldn't change leads. And Eddie Perez is a veteran jockey, and he switched sticks, and she wouldn't do anything. And then as soon as she saw a horse in front of her, it was like, all right, perfect, call it a day.
Yeah, these are the horses that have kind of shown you who they are 19 times, and I'm a slow learner, but I do learn.
I agree.
So I went with
fool me
Lumberjack
once, shame on you. Fool me 20 times, shame on me.
Yeah, like at a certain point, right?
I totally agree. Who is your alternative?
Lumberjack Leslie is one I have really had in my mind that she is a turf horse. And the turf debut was pretty encouraging. She caught a similar field, didn't embarrass herself, and she has upside. It's only her second try on the grass, not, start number 20. So maybe this is where she makes a further step forward. I think there's a little bit of quality to this filly, and she kind of just needs everything her own way.
Yeah, I agree. I picked one that's a little more off the wall in the 3 Sweet Baby Shea. So my thought on Sweet Baby Shea was that she ran on the turf last year. It was an 8-horse field. She went off 12 to 1. She took some money, all things considered. She absolutely stood in the gate when the gate opened, spotted the field 5 or 6 lengths, and then just kind of went through the motions. But she actually picked off a few horses late. And I'm wondering if maybe anybody else around her might not be that aggressive. This horse is pretty fast. Sure. And I mean, Ezekiel Laras had a tough meet, but he is a veteran rider. And I'm just wondering if maybe she can get out and sort of back the pace down. And, I think if you're making a multi-race bet, you want an alternative to the 6. And I think we've given out 2 realistic ones in Lumberjack Leslie and Sweet Baby Shea. And look, she may win, but I mean, it's going to be a situation where
I'm not going to brag. I wouldn't brag about it if you have her.
No, exactly. Right. And what do they say? What is the saying? Nobody ever paid the mortgage with 1 to 5 shots or something. Harvey Pack had a good line about
something, it. Yeah, something like that. That's good advice.
Not a man alive who took 2 to 5 or something. Right.
Sure.
So, yeah, it was bad. But anyway, that caps the Saturday night Space City Pick 6. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. Excited that you will be in the Houston area for next week's racing, which of course the week culminates with the Texas Champions Day card. 10 races on tap in the NHC contest. Very exciting. Do
you have a cowboy hat?
I don't. I actually went to the rodeo carnival the other day. Yeah, you probably have cowboy boots too, which I also don't.
I also do. It's going to be full on like Jess does Dallas costume for this. Like this is.
I think it was maybe because all of my relatives that lived in the Northeast assumed that we all had horses and ranches and cowboy boots. That I was like, no, I don't have any cowboy boots.
Well, you have a few days to go shopping.
There are 7 calendar days left before the shopping days left before. So Jessica, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you very soon. Plenty of exciting things happening with our friends at First Bet Technology that involves Santa Anita and live money contests. Of course, we cover the Golden Hour Pick 4 on this network and specifically on this podcast each and every week, but we've got some contests coming up that are worth noting, including a $500 live money bankroll challenge on March 19th offers a couple of spots into the $1,500 Santa Anita Derby challenge, which will take place on Saturday, April 9th, Santa Anita Derby Day. Make sure that you take a look at those contests on santaanita.com and expressbet.com. Opportunities to play on track or online. Get on board with the contest scene at Santa Anita. All right, that will move us to part number 3 of this handicapping odyssey. And the next guest on the show will be the one and only host of the HHH Racing Podcast, the world's favorite and perhaps best handicapping math teacher, Howard Kravets, my friend and compadre for this Golden Hour Pick 4. Howard, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. I literally just walked in from school about 2 minutes ago from the rain, but I'm ready to rock and roll. How are you doing today?
Hey, that's great to hear, and glad that we could link up. And before we get into the Golden Hour Pick 4, let's talk about your recent second place finish in the Ultimate Betting Challenge. Many congrats.
Man, I'm really excited. Actually, just had my good friend Matt Miller, who won the BCBC, send me a picture of. You can see this is Express Train beating Warrant to commemorate my $3,500 straight exacta.
Oh, that's great.
I'm chuckling because I never bet this kind of money except for these live money contests. You know how that is.
Yeah.
It just happened to be fortunate to hit the last race. Actually, the key to the sequence was really Count Again in the Kilroe Mile, who got just, the best ride possible from Flavian Pratt. Saved ground, tipped out. The reason why that was important, Nick, is I linked the double to As Time Goes By in the previous race before that into the Kilroe Mile with Count Again, and I linked Count Again to Express Train. So I had big doubles going as well as the exacta in the last race in the big cap. It worked out. Finished 5th in the Pegasus. I'm just on heater right now, but I want to say though publicly, I'm just so honored and fortunate to be, on the list of unbelievable names in these contests. Marshall Grahams and the Mustaris, the world. I can go on and on. The Christian Helmers. Just the fact that I see my name up there is crazy. So I'm blessed and honored, and just try to keep it going.
Absolutely. Well, many congrats. And of course, you've gotten there because you've done the work and you've got a good opinion. And so when you can put all those things together, it certainly makes it happen. Funny with the photos. And I know you're somebody that likes to have, you obviously, we can see that you have photos behind you. When I finished 4th in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge in 2014, I had 3 partners that I needed to send money to because we had each put in money to buy the entry. And so I wrapped the money that I sent them in pictures of the horses that helped us do well that day. So one person got a Take Charge Brandy photo, and one got a Caraconti, and one got Judy the Beauty. So, and I put the name of the horse that they were getting in their photo in the memo line. So always a fun thing to do. And I will admit, I've watched, as I'm sure you've watched the replay of the Big Cap a few times since then, and you'll continue to as time goes by.
Yeah, it was really exciting. You have to. I know Matt Bernier at home. He's got he's got She-Shirts, the Devil. He's got Jersey Town. He's got his horse Hall of Fame that's helped him get there. I think we all do. It's what makes the races fun. And I need to get another horse in there from the Breeders' Cup. The Japan filly that won the.
Loves Only You.
Yeah. I need to get a Loves Only You. I got to contact someone in Japan because that was a nice score for me also with the double. But
well, since this is a video podcast, I'll let everybody know that I have my Hall of Fame as well, which includes Blame Beating Zenyatta. So maybe not as popular among some, but yeah.
I needed Blame in that race. I was very happy to see Blame win.
I was a big, I tell a lot of people I was not a Zenyatta hater by any means. I was a Blame lover. I loved Blame from the time he ran in the Super Derby the year before. Howard, it's good to have you here. We're going to talk about the Golden Hour Pick 4. Let's get right into it. This is part of a Santa Anita card that actually will also offer a mandatory payout in the Rainbow Six. The Irish O'Brien goes as race number 8, the first leg of the Golden Hour Pick 4, about 6.5 furlongs down the hill. Is it as simple as Becca Taylor just being much too good for these, or did you have an alternative?
No. Becca Taylor is going to be a big underlay. I guess I understand the 4 to 5 morning line. I mean, she's very likable, Calbred, obviously. I mean, she's 6 for 6, done absolutely nothing wrong. But you talked about Harvey Pack a little bit with before with Jessica Paquette. What do you say? Never bet a horse who's never, a favorite's never done something before. Beckett Taylor's never run down the hill. She's never gone. She actually did go 6.5. I apologize, but she's never been down the hill, which we all know could be a a tricky trip. She's beaten Calbreds mainly. I mean, she did win 2 back at Golden Gate nicely, but that was 5.5. It is Flavian. She makes a lot of sense. I'm going to try to beat her, Nick. I even though I know she could win. There's 2 horses that I like better than her from a betting perspective. I like number 5, Sensible Cat. 3 on Moyne Line, Carla Gaines, Juan Hernandez. What has she done wrong? Absolutely nothing. And not only that, Nick, she's been facing open company with buyers that are similar to Becca Taylor. The last race was downhill, and she beat Royal Address, who came back and won. So that that form fits. She's 4 for 9 overall. I think she's going to sit a nice trip. I like Sensible Cat here in first, and I'll take Eddie's New Dream, the 6, who's 4 to 1 Moyne Line for Ben Cecil and Redham Racing Murray Gutierrez. For a lot of the similar reasons, Nick, she's been facing open company. She's been doing it well. It's not a turn back because she raced 6.5 last time in Sunshine's Philly and Meriturf Sprint against Legs Galore, who just wired the field. No one was really going to catch her that day. I mean, I just think in general, Nick, the 5 and 6 have faced much better horses than Becca Taylor. I'm using Becca Taylor defensively as a B, but I'm going to try to beat her.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I thought Sensible Cat made a lot of sense, pun intended, and is kind of could be a downhill turf lover. So I don't have any qualms with trying her. She should get a good trip from a little bit off the pace. I do think the morning line's a little aggressive, only because she doesn't really have the figures that support getting this kind of backing. And if some combination of maybe I will, and maybe even She's Devoted got involved in a very hot pace last time out. She's a little bit interesting to me, shortening back up in distance, maybe able to settle and make one run. That was a much better race than it looks on paper, in my opinion.
Yeah, I did look at her actually better 2 back, and she didn't run very well, and so I was sort of against her last time. Last time she ran fantastic. I mean, she stumbled. You can see the early time for him if you look at the you look at the figs. Very fast
Huge.
fast internal fractions. So listen, you got Baltus, Bravo. I don't know about the 8 to 1, but probably somewhere in the 6 to 1 range. A small field. I've got no problem with the 7. I have her in the mix, just not in my top 3.
Totally agree. On to the second leg of the Golden Hour Pick 4, which is going to be race number 8 at Golden Gate Fields, a $50,000 starter allowance event at a mile on the Tapeta surface, where it looks to me, Howard, as if favoritism will likely be split between Autism Innocence and Sacred Beauty. Sacred Beauty maybe with a little bit of a pace edge of the two, but of course Jonathan Wong training Autism Innocence, his horse is always well spotted.
Yeah, I think when you talk about this race, Nick, you got to go back and watch the replay of the February 26th race at Golden Gate. There are 4 horses that are in this race coming out of that race. Remember Sue, Gold Rush Gal, Sacred Beauty, as you mentioned. And then there's the number 8, Cara Cynthia, who you don't have to be a genius. When you watch this replay, this horse was just getting a perfect trip in behind horses the whole time, could not find room anywhere in the entire length of the stretch. And Tammaro, the jockey, just sort of gave up the last 200 yards. I'm not suggesting he didn't try, but just he knew he wasn't going to win on this 3-year-old filly. She had a ton of horse. She by far is the horse that I want out of that race. It was a dawdling pace. And interestingly enough, the horses that are not coming out of that race, that are in the race on Saturday, a horse like Autism Innocence, the 7, and even the 1, Ball Lass, who is not nearly good enough, have early pace. So it looks like to me there's going to be much more speed in this race, at least on paper, than there was in the aforementioned race that I just spoke of. It just seems to set up really well for Cara Cynthia, the 8 on the outside, 4 to 1. By the way, does get a jockey change here to Silvio Amador, who's 23% better than Tammaro, if you like that angle. The 8 makes a lot of sense to me. I'm going with her on top. I have the number 3, Remember Sue, who tried to close into that slow pace out of that same race and ran well just to lose the Sacred Beauty. And I just want to throw sort of a long shot in there, Nick. The number 2, Chula Girl, has pedigree to go long. She's sprinted twice. She's been slower by the figs right now, but she's by hard spun out of an Archmare, Love and Marriage, who was a Chad Brown horse who ran on the turf that you might remember going 2 turns. This horse has got a lot of two-turn breeding in her. She's sort of the fuzzy that I would throw around in this sequence. A real good contest horse. Speaking of contests, especially your pick and praise where you're trying to find a price in a smaller field, I see no reason why this horse can't run well if she gets the pace to run into and stretching out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do remember Love and Marriage very well. I'm a big fan of the Justice Family Racing Silks, blue and white. I think it's blue and white stripes. Pretty. So I'm at the stage of my life where I judge ownership based on quality of silks. So
Sure, why not?
Why not, right? On to leg 3 of the Golden Hour, pick 4, which is back at Santa Anita. It's the nightcap, a 1 mile turf race. These are starter allowance runners. Big field going postward. Speaking of Chad Brown, Frontier Market, a former Brown trainee, one of the horses that I think will get a little bit of money on the outside, but the widest run runner, Keystone Field, looks like the likely favorite.
Yeah, I mean, the Keystone Field, I have him second. I thought this was a very tough race and a really tough race to end the mandatory 20-cent pick 6 for those people that are playing that on Saturday. I'll be one of those people. I think you have to spread here. The 12 hole, I don't care if it's Flavian Pratt or anyone. That is a tough post, as you well know, Nick. It's Santa Anita, even with the rails down, which I'm assuming they're going to be on Saturday. The 12 are going a mile. It's a short run in that first turn. And it's not as if Keystone Field has some blazing speed where she can just, come over to the inside and save ground. So Flavian's going to have to work out a trip. I can't think of a better jockey out in California or really almost anywhere in the country to do that. I have her second. The horse I've got on top, and I have to admit, I would definitely not take the morning line price in this horse, is the number 5, Exaltation for Peter Urton and Johnny V. I did not see a lot of early speed in this race, Nick. And in a big field, we have horses that are somewhat similar, in their talent. I would love to take a horse that can go to the lead. I think if Johnny V is aggressive, he'll get the lead on the early U.S. Time form U.S. pace. This gelding should have the lead. Stumbled last time. That's the reason why he was further back. The mile, you might question, but 3 back ran a 90 buyer, which would absolutely win this race. I've got Exaltation on top. I've got the 12 second, and I have the 8 move over, 8-1 in third. These horses don't usually win, though, in consecutive races. It's a bit of concern, but he's in very good form. I'll just quickly mention the 11 Frontier Market. Not a big fan of 9-year-olds, Nick. I mean, obviously this horse used to be very good in 2019. In 2020 was in grade 3s, grade 1s. Was only in for 25 last time. Will be better second off the layoff. I don't know. I just don't like the outside post, and I don't like 9-year-olds in general.
Yeah, Father Time looks like he caught up with Frontier Market. It's going to be tough for him, I think, to be able to step up to this kind of class level. So we'll see where he shakes out. I do totally agree with you about the difficult outside post for Keystone Field. I agreed in looking at the Timeform US that both the 5 Exaltation and the 7 Crash Corrigan stretching out in distance looked like they might get the best of it pace-wise. Honest Brie is a horse who in the past had some speed. He actually won a race on the Kentucky Derby card in September of 2020, where he was somewhat forwardly placed. It looks like that speed is largely gone. That is the third leg of the Golden Hour, pick 4. The final leg is the nightcap at Golden Gate, a $25,000 maiden claimer. Going to give us an opportunity to see how the other half lives in the nightcap with some of the cheaper ones, but these are always fun getting them together. You got a few class droppers in here, Howard, but it's your favorite trainer on the card, Tim Bellisis, who trains the Car Cynthia and also Union Wave, who's a huge favorite here in the nightcap.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a lot of people are going to single the 1 Union Wave. I don't know about you, Nick, but in these kind of races, I usually like to look at the drop downs right away.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There are 3 of them. The 5, Leave It on the Field. The 8, Gallopin' Gourmet, and the 9, Lessons of Autism are all dropping down. But I guess I'm going to be a bit contrarian with myself. I really don't like any of them, to be very honest. Even though they're dropping down, the 9 on the outside was horrible last time, and now they're just dropping down to 25. Don't have a lot of confidence there. Gallopin' Gourmet, I mean, he's okay. He's a 5-year-old. Not a big fan of 5-year-olds trying to break their maiden. And then the 5, Leave It on the Field, has shown no ability to sustain anything past half mile. So I'm going with the Moto Obviouses there, the 1 and the 7. I like actually Gallon Gray, the 7 on top, 3-1. Faced Union Wave last time. They both got perfectly fine trips. I don't really have much to say from the trip perspective. I just like the fact the 7 is outside of the 1, gets blinkers on, has been working well. The 1 can obviously win, will probably be less than 6-5. But I don't know, debuted as a 4-year-old. Might regress a little bit from that big effort first time out. I'm going to go 7-1-8 here in this race, fully admitting that one of those drop downs can win. I just don't really like them in this spot.
Yeah, I agree, and I understand. I think this 6-5 morning line has to do with the fact that nobody else in here is really embraceable in terms of the public saying, "Okay, I can bet that horse." And it just works out that Union Wave, both from speed figures and the quality of competition, looks like he stands out a tad. But I agree that Gallon Gray gets a better shot at him being drawn outside as he now becomes a little bit more of the hunter rather than the hunted. And we have to admit that Union Wave was 8-1 on debut, whereas Gallon Gray was just 3-1 coming in off a claim by Jack Steiner, who's a high percentage trainer who was also moving him up in class. I always will give a second look to horses like the 5 Leave It on the Field because of the Time Form US running line from last time. Went very fast. But the other thing is that it's not really clear this horse has any ability, right? He stopped on a dime last time and didn't really show anything on debut. He'll get the best opportunity to do it dropping in class, but that is a tough horse to embrace from a multi-race perspective, one that maybe you fool around with in the exactas or tries or something, maybe have one backup ticket in this Golden Hour Pick 4. Well, that does it for the Golden Hour Pick 4 sequence. Remember, of course, the Golden Hour double is included in that 4-race stretch. Both of the nightcaps, our friends over at First Bet Technology offer up these low takeout, higher minimum wagers that I think are a lot of fun. And you play the Golden Hour Pick 4 with any regularity? I will admit I have played it once.
I have to say I don't play too often. I do like playing San Anita, especially on bigger days. The field sizes of San Anita, I don't want to rip on California racing because in general I love it out there. Just are really small. I don't play this Golden Hour Pick 4 too often, but I do play San Anita. Of course, watch Golden Gate, Matt Ditterman. One of the best in the business, a great announcer, along with yourself and others. So, but it's not a bet I play too often. But because I had the honor, of course, being on the show today, I will definitely be playing it on Saturday.
Hey, mission accomplished then. Yes, and I agree. An acknowledgement to Matt Dinnerman and Frank Miramati, the announcers at both places, both good individuals and good announcers as well. So, Howard, thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to connecting again in the future.
Thanks for having me. Good luck to everyone on Saturday in that Golden Hour Pick 4.
Thanks again to Howard Kravets for coming on to take a look at this Golden Hour Pick 4. Well, that does it for guests on this edition of the In the Money Players podcast. I'd like to thank Howard Kravets, Jessica Paquette, and Matt Bernier for coming on board, and thank all of you, the listeners, the subscribers, the In the Money Plus members, everybody that makes what we do here at the In the Money Media Network happen. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without your support, certainly, for sure. And I appreciate having had the opportunity the last 2 weeks to host in the absence of Peter Thomas Fornatal, who is undoubtedly having at least a little bit of fun overseas going to Cheltenham. If anybody saw his picture of his breakfast this morning, you will know that not only is Pete probably doing his good work drinking, he's also eating quite well. And I can't wait to have him discuss this classic English breakfast that involves beans and eggs and sausages and tomatoes and mushrooms. Yeah, it looked very, very interesting. I'm, of course, somebody always willing to hear a story about all things culinary. You don't want to hear me babble anymore about that. Thanks again to all of the guests and to all of you. And until next time, best of luck.